Uh, just to give you my perspective where I'm coming from, and then I'll talk about the foreign funded NGOs. I have a background which is a little different from others in the panel, in the sense that while you are involved in the NGOs in India, or the government that regulates the NGOs, and the Indian institutions, different kind of institutions involved in social civic work. In my case, I live in the US for the last 45 years. I visit India every year 3 or 4 times without fail. This trip is 6 weeks long, so I'm here quite a lot, so I'm very much in touch. And for the last 25 years, I've had no day job or business or any other activity, and I've spent all my time volunteering for my own NGO called Infinity Foundation, which I started with my own funds. The purpose of this NGO is a watchdog in the US on what US institutions are doing concerning India. And I believe I'm the only one of that kind, an Indian watchdog, an Indian gaze, based in the US, not based in Delhi looking at somebody far away, but based in the US, spending all my time. I study what the government is doing, US government, think tanks, school educational material on India, universities and academic conferences, the church, and all kinds of various organizations that are involved in the study of India. In fact, until 10 years ago, and then I didn't have the funding to continue, but until 10 years ago, I used to maintain the only database of everyone who is in the US involved in the study of India or engagement with India or encounter with India of any kind, a database of who's who, whether they are in religion, history, philosophy, political science, anthropology, international relations, etc., etc. I had a database of these guys because I would scan all the journals, I would look at all the conferences, get a copy of every PhD concerning India, regardless of discipline. So I was kind of one man with a group of people helping me that I got on board. It was getting overwhelming, huge thing you can't just do. And often I would find that the Indian government policies were so naive, they don't really understand the US. They just somebody sitting here imagining the US to be something. The view of India, or the view of the US that the Indians have is pop culture, movies, sports, fashions, products. But what are the deep institutional mechanisms doing is something that people in India have not really studied. So I decided to do that. Now, what got me going, the work was not NGO oriented, it was on many other things I described. But what got me particularly interested in the NGOs, that the US funds operating in India. So I'm looking at the other side of what you're looking at. You're calling foreign funded, but have you been to their headquarters? Have you gone around? Have you looked beneath the surface? And I'm not saying gone for a conference 3 days and give you nice treatment, you come back, but have you really done your due diligence? Have you done the Freedom of Information Act we have? Have you used it in the US, which I use a lot, to understand what they're doing, why they're doing it? And I have. Now one incident comes to mind, which started me on this track. I was having lunch in Princeton University. I live in that town, and I know some of the people and the professors there. So one African American joined us. I was talking to some professors having lunch. One African American joined us, and they introduced us. And he said, "Oh, you're from India? I just came back from India." So I said, "Oh, well, that's interesting. What were you doing there?" And he said, "I'm part of the Afro-Dalit project." Now, I never heard of such a project. So I said, "What is this Afro-Dalit project?" And he said, "Oh, you don't know, you're from India, you don't know what is Afro-Dalit?" I said, "No, I don't know." He said, "Well, the Dalits are the Africans of India, they're the blacks of India, and the Brahmins are the whites of India, and we are going there to teach them the history of black-white relations in America, to teach them how to interpret their own racial relations in India. So how the blacks have been slaved in America is how the Dalits are being slaved in India, and we are being sent there to give them youth. It's called youth empowerment, education, youth empowerment camps, and human rights and so on. So I got very concerned, and nobody thought about this. So I went to his office, and he had a map, which is on the cover of my book, Breaking India. He had a map of balkanized India, and I got a scan of that. And he told me there is Dalitsthan.org. So I went to Dalitsthan.org. And then I said, who funds it? He gave me, he's very innocent, very transparent fellow. And he said, this guy, these agencies, this church, this group, they fund it. So I contacted all these people and said, I'm a reporter, I'm a researcher, I'm very impressed by all this work you're doing in India and would like to know more. And they all send me big boxes of all kind of material, really proud, showing off what their projects in India are. A lot of them. I built a database on what the Mormons are doing, what the Lutheran Church is doing, all these different churches, different groups. I built that. Then I hired some students from Princeton University to scan it and analyze and figure out what's going on. That is how my project started in the 90s. This is one of many, many things I do. This is one of the projects. So this led me to a huge network in the United States. Dalit Freedom Network is one example. They're based in Denver. And you wonder why some white guys, Christians, whose own record of race in the United States is not that clean, would be interested in saving the Dalits in India, while in their own country they have got a racial reputation. Why is that going? So I was looking at all the Joshua Project. I looked at all kind of these projects, and I started going to their conferences. They have a lot of conferences on how you convert Indian students when they come to United States. You become friends, they're lonely, you offer them help, you gradually don't talk about religion first, respect them, all these kind of strategies, what called inculturation. So I learned, I became very expert at that. I made a lot of friends in the various theological seminaries. I have a Princeton Theological Seminary is one of the premier seminaries in the world where they train the Christian theology, philosophy, and they have a fairly significant department on Hinduism where they're studying the Hindus as the other from a Christian point of view, how to engage the Hindu, what you think of them, how do you argue with them, how do you debate with them, how do you make them happy. They learn shlokas, they learn bhajans, how you can make them very happy, how you can get inside their village and disarm them, how you can also bring them down if you need to. If in your church, one of your church members comes and says, my daughter or son want to marry a Hindu, how you can inform the young couple about your point of view and their point of view and how you can argue, something that no Hindu Pandit in the temple can do. If a Indian Hindu is marrying a Christian and he takes, I saw, a local temple, one young man brought this white girl and they wanted to ask questions to the priest, and the priest is embarrassed, doesn't know anything. But here they're training very systematically how to engage these others. So my knowledge of foreign funded NGOs starts not with what is happening in India, but what is happening where the funding starts. So I have studied this very systematically, and then along with the funding is the ideology. Ideology, what are the ideas? After all, funding is not just given for the heck of it. Funding is to promote certain ideas, grand narratives, history, identity formation, separatism, all of these. And I'm not only talking about church, I'm talking about Kashmir separatists. I've gone and seen how they're funded, Sikh separatists, Khalistanis, how they're funded. Asia Society in New York, one of the premier organizations. They have some organizations here also. One of the board members, he is the owner of Ethan Allen Furniture Company, big furniture company, and on his website it says one of his sons died in Kashmir fighting the Indian armed forces. He was a rebellion, he was a terrorist, kind of what Indians would call, or the army would call a terrorist, but from their point of view they're fighting for freedom. So anyway, these are the sort of things I've tracked. I've gone to conferences on Dalit freedom and liberation of Dalit. I've gone to South Africa, gone to Bangkok, gone to Hong Kong, many conferences in various parts of the world, where a whole nexus, a whole network of such agencies exist. US-based and European-based are the ones that I've looked at mostly, and their target is India, and their target is basically intervening in India in terms of for identities of people, the tribal areas, and young people, modern people. They've segmented Indians into different groups and categories, and for each of them they've got very plans, strategies, products, funding. So it's a fairly large enterprise. And I think the database that they've created on India is probably more sophisticated than any government in India has. Very detailed database at the village level of all kind of demographics and socio-demographics. So the foreign funding nexus, as I call it, is money, ideas and ideology, forums and channels. Like this is a forum where we are meeting. There is a huge number of such forums. They are in universities, they are in think tanks, they are in church groups, they are in human rights organizations. There is a very large number of these forums and channels. And training of people. So they train people. Some of them are Westerners who are the teachers. They are generally Westerners. And then there are Indians who go there and they're given some advanced training. So Indians go there, like in Princeton Theological Seminary, they have often groups of Indians who come and go through various durations of education, and they invite me as a local guy. I always go there and meet them, say hi, just to find out what's going on. So that's the source of my views. It's not opinions I just made up or read some newspaper or talked to a few people. I've done a systematic, what you would call industry analysis. Before all this, I used to be a consultant, and then I used to be I own my own companies. And when I was a consultant, my job was industry analysis, which means a client like AT&T would say, why don't you analyze this industry? And my job was to analyze who's who, what they do, who's got money, who makes and who supplies and who markets. So I started looking at India studies as an industry in America. India studies is an American industry which employs a few thousand people whose job is to do this. So no Ministry of External Affairs is bothered to do this. Nobody, no journalist knows. Our journalists are jokers because when they talk about the US, they really don't know what they're talking about. They have a very superficial idea. They have never gone beneath the surface. So to go beneath the surface, you have to become sophisticated. You have to be able to be one of them. You have to really get to know how to understand, decode what they are telling you. You have to read annual reports, lots of them. You have to attend seminars, workshops like this, make friends with people, and I've been doing that. And this is my full-time job. It's not a short kind of part-time thing. So based on this, I find that a large part of the foreign funding for people in India are naive and unconscious in the role they are playing in the giant scheme of things. They are a little cog in a wheel, and the little cog is not told too much. He's not told the whole picture. He's just told what he needs to know. Yeah, and so they are very innocent about it. They don't really, most people who work in these Ford Foundation and Templeton Foundation and all these, the Indians don't really have the whole picture. You can't blame them. They've just been, maybe the very senior people know, and they prefer to not know, look the other side. So in the US, I started looking at the history of America. Where does this mindset come from? And the American mindset, the British and the European mentality towards the other came from the colonial experience. Because they had colonies, so they framed ideas of what these other non-white people are like, and they came up with British, French, all these different colonizers had their ideas based on colonial experience. America didn't really have colonies in the same sense. So the American experience of the other came from the fact that they are the diaspora who came from Europe. Americans are the Englishmen who came from Europe, and they had to clear the land from the natives. So they had to get rid of these people to clear the land and make it theirs. So this whole experience starting in the 1600s of portraying the natives as primitive people, violent people. They ill-treat their women, they don't have human rights, they're not well educated, and we are the civilized people, we have to do all this for them. This was part of the civilizing mission in the American sense, quite different from the colonial sense. And then the experience of bringing slaves, and the whole processing of who they are and why they're inferior, and then the invasion of Mexico based on no provocation, no logic, no reason other than they're primitive people, they're beating up their wives, they're sitting drunk all day, they're not very cultured, so we should invade them. So this type of literature, the literature that was developed to depict the other in a certain way, has a technical term in US history. It's called atrocity literature. Atrocity literature means all the compilation of all the things that you can find about others कि उनकी बदनामी करनी है, उनमें क्या बुरी बात है. So if you need to one day invade them, you can quickly push the button and a lot of atrocity literature will start pumping out on CNN. Okay, it's very interesting when the US decided that Saddam Hussein should be gotten rid of. Within 3 days, the CNN, all the channels were full of documentaries and interviews with these women got abused and this one got, and these are things they had been building up for 10-15 years. It's not like they could build up so much documentary overnight. They had it sitting in reserve. They have data banks of atrocity literature on India, on Pakistan, on Bangladesh, on Russia, on China, on all these things. So there are people whose job is to constantly come and study, go back and put all these reports of human rights abuses, women's abuses, this abuse, that abuse, and it feeds the database of atrocity literature just in case it becomes useful one day. Okay, so this is a very serious game which a lot of Indians are involved in playing, being funded for doing so-called good work, but as part of this good work, they're also feeding the atrocity literature. And they're also serving as what I call the modern sepoys, a huge army of Indian sepoys. These are not the ones wearing with a gun and that uniform like the British era. These are people who are doing NGO work. A lot of the NGOs are foreign sepoys. They are doing that work. They are doing work which Indians can do better, cheaper than sending a bunch of white guys to do the work. So these are sepoys that come in useful. Some are not going to be usable because they're very Indian patriotic. Some are more compromisable. Some have a price that they can be bought off at the right time. Some already have been bought off. Some are ideologically very full of hatred of India anyway. So you can't characterize all of them in one, put them all in one box. They are all over the spectrum. So, but this is part of what goes on in the foreign funding, is to collect atrocity literature, to build a network of your own kind of people who are on your wavelength. And the other thing is the export of terminology, framework. What is human rights? How do you decide what constitutes human rights? You know, when they were developing the Charter for Genocide, which later became enacted as UN Charter for Genocide. I don't know if you know this, but the original definition of genocide, which was not adopted, included a clause called cultural genocide. Cultural genocide meant that if you go and you destroy the culture of people, even though physically you not harmed them, you've taken away their language, they've taken away their religion, you've taken away their way of life, that is considered cultural genocide. It was considered an international illegal criminal offense under the original definition, original draft, and the Western countries deleted that. So there is no cultural genocide category today. There is only genocide which is physical genocide. You physically kill people, that is so. But if their way of life is gone, as long as they're well fed and they're wearing Nike shoes and they're having smartphones and they have good clothes, then you've done nothing wrong, because on a physical material plane they're well looked after. The Westerners were concerned that if there were a category called cultural genocide, then then all kinds of programs to convert people on large scale might become implicated as an act of cultural genocide. So you see, this issue of foreign-funded NGOs I think I'm running out of time, but this is something you need a full day workshop to just understand how the foreign nexus operates, because all of you are looking at how you at the receiving end are coping with it. Some are coping with it nicely, some have compromised, some have not compromised, some are saying we have no choice, some are saying they're doing us good. All that you are doing at the receiving end, but why aren't more people doing what I am doing, which I alone can't do? Why aren't more people going and setting up an NGO over there to study them the way they set up NGOs to study us? So there are any number of NGOs in India, Western NGOs studying all kind of Indian society, how government works, how this one works. Why hasn't the Indian government, why haven't Tatas, Birlas, Ambanis, all these very wealthy people set up an NGO and said, you give us annual report on human rights problems there, what is their relationship? You see, if you look at, you should know how to talk back also. For instance, when Obama wrote this thing about religious freedom and human rights, I mean, none of the Indian guys knew what like to say. I wish I had a way to say it. I have written a lot of articles on this. There is a U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, which is set up, it's a part of the U.S. Congress. It reports to the State Department and the CIA, and its job is to monitor so-called religious freedom, and it works with church groups in various countries and get one-sided input, and then they produce reports sanctioning and saying that this country is in the danger list and this country there are no human rights. So he was obviously getting his data from there. Okay, he was getting his data from there. But I have written in my books, I have criticized the US Commission, I have taken apart their reports on India year after year and given rebuttals on what the errors are. Nobody else has done that, but I've been doing it alone. And this US Commission on Religious Freedom does not have a single Hindu, or a single Buddhist, or a single Jain, or a single Sikh. They're all mostly Christians and certain amount of Jews, and because of huge pressure from Muslims, they have a certain amount of Muslims. So the Abrahamic religions are the ones who are monitoring the world idea of religious freedom according to their own definition. And if you read reports by blacks, Christians, well-known black Christians, they will tell you that the segregation in the church in the United States is so intense. In fact, blacks will tell you that the church is the most racially segregated institution in the United States, more segregated than schools, offices, neighborhoods, government jobs. I mean, other areas have done a much better job of desegregating and mixing people up, but the church itself, I mean, there's black churches, there's different churches are by race. There's a Korean church. In fact, the Indian Christian, they got a Malayali church different than a Tamil church. So this is true. So these are things you are not told. And when somebody tells you all kind of stuff, you are apologetic because you do not know how to talk back. So you need to know this information in order to become confident, in order to know how to talk back. I am not saying that our country is without problems. Our Hinduism is without problems. We got a lot of problems. I'm terribly sorry that we have the problems. We must solve those problems. We must admit to those problems. We need help to solve those problems. But we do not have to abandon who we are because somebody else got all their act together, because the doctor who's coming here to fix your problems got the same disease himself, and probably even worse. And I had another project. I hired a lot of university students. They're very enthusiastic. These white Christian university students are very enthusiastic about what I'm doing, because just like we got these liberal type people who are counterculture in our sense, they also got those kind of people. So I hired these kind of people. And so one of the projects we did is we said, let's collect international statistics on crime and human rights problems in different countries. So we looked at some poor, former colonial Christian countries like Mexico, like Philippines. Because if you want to compare poor countries, you should compare with poor countries. You can't compare a poor country with a rich country. So we took poor Christian countries like Philippines and Mexico, and we took some poor, Muslim countries in Africa and so on. And then we took India, and we scaled the statistics to population. Because you can't say that there are 50 rapes in India, but there's 1 billion people. You can't compare it with a country which has only 20 million people. So we scaled it per million population. And the statistics of these Christian countries and some of these Muslim countries on a per capita or per million population basis for these human rights is far, far worse, sometimes 3, 4, 5 times worse statistics. So what I tell my Christian friends in the United States is you should go to the Christian countries and fix these problems first, because you converted them on the promise that you will solve these problems. You should make good on that promise before you go and market it elsewhere. And you should... And you don't even need to go outside the United States. You go, I live in Princeton, which is a very sort of high-end kind of town, but right next to us is Trenton, which is the state capital of New Jersey. And Trenton is a lot of crime, lot of poverty, a lot of drug abuse, lot of HIV, single moms, rapes, whatever. You look at the statistics right there in the United States, in the inner cities, and it is, you take those and you compare them with the so-called third world. There is a third world inside the United States, and so these Christians have to solve their own problem right in their own backyard. So I think this business of bringing human rights, I had this argument with Suhail Seth, this guy I never met before, the Jaipur Literary Festival. And I don't know if you saw the video, but he's saying how we should be very great, we are so assimilative. They brought us the tabla, and this one brought us tandoori, and this one, English brought us cricket and whatnot. So I told him that this is the typical invasion theory of India, where every chapter is which invader came. So first, supposedly the Aryans came and brought Sanskrit and Vedas. That is the theory. And then the Greeks came and brought philosophy, because we didn't know how to think properly before that. And then a bunch of other invaders come, and then the Mughals bring us some big buildings, and they bring tandoori and the tikka and this tabla. And then the British bring us cricket and English and so on. And then I said that now you should get the Americans to come and invade us and bring us human rights. And so the whole group laughed and all that, and he was very but that is exactly what we are doing, is we have this complex. A lot of our elite have this complex that we ourselves are incapable of solving problems, and we now need to figure out China ko bulaye, America ko bulaye. The China, maybe they will come and set up factories, and we'll all get factory jobs. तो फायदा हो जाएगा. We will be very assimilative. We will prove to the world कि हम बड़े adaptive लोग हैं. So I think the root cause in this is not the American, is not the foreign evangelist and all that. It is the inferiority complex of the Indians. It is the Indians themselves who are colonized mentally, who just prefer this Firangi kind of association. So Firangi nahi hai to NRI hai, maybe he's almost like that. वो शायद होगा. वो नहीं है तो शायद वो कुछ जहाँ से पढ़ के लिख के आया वो होगा. Something like that. So there is a whole spectrum of association with the dominant cultures, and the closer you are, the more you are considered to have a status. I think this is the inferiority complex, and the NGOs can take advantage. Foreign funded NGOs can become have a lot of clout and take advantage, precisely because Indians themselves have this complex and this problem. So my idea, my concluding is that if you want ideas on what to do, I think you have to, if you decontrol Hindu temples, there are several lakh Hindu temples which are under government control, whose total turnover in terms of what they collect is huge amount of money, but all goes to the government. If you were to denationalize it and give it back to the community, and there are some people for creating state-by-state organizations to take over the temples, and these temples compete against NGOs to provide services, to provide education, to provide food, to provide shelter, because that has been in our tradition. Dharma is not religion. Dharma is not just about you and God. Dharma is also about looking after animals, looking after nature, environmentalism, looking after society, looking after yourself with yoga and all that. So if you were to really make them as centers of Dharma in a very wide sense, not religious sense, but in a wide sense, I think you can give the foreign NGOs and all these people a good run for the money. And the final comment I have is that a country that says we are this superpower, we got so many billionaires and this, that, and that, I mean, it's a shame that we cannot even get enough funding from our own people to provide basic services, and we need to go begging to other cultures and other countries, and we're willing to sell ourselves out, and we are willing to have them come and brainwash us and dictate terms and work for them and so on. So we have outsourced our human rights. We have outsourced our basic sense of civic responsibilities and being able to think and analyze for ourselves. I'll stop here because it's a huge topic for me, and would love to then take questions. Thank you.
Okay. I want to ask a question from Mr. Malhotra. Mr. Malhotra, the investigation that you've done through your NGO, what is an example of that in India? Can you identify some examples?
Yeah, I have a book called Breaking India. It's a 600-page book. Do we have copies here? We can get you copies. I've given about 100 examples in that. Named people, named institutions, both Western and Indian.
But could you give one or two examples?
One example is the Dalit Freedom Network, which is based in Denver, which has offices in US affiliates in India and offices in branches in Europe, and they have pushed laws for human rights violations in India, in the European Union, in the British Parliament, in the US, come very close to having sanctions imposed on India in the United Nations. So that's an example of an international agency whose India activity is collecting data about atrocity literature, so they can use it. But when you look at this data they present on atrocity literature, there is no opportunity given to cross-examine it, to falsify it, to show that it is biased, to show it is one-sided. So this data which is there's a whole network that goes around collecting this so-called atrocities against the Christians in all over India, and without proper filtering and without proper analysis, this gets reported all over, and when it's reported and quoted enough time it becomes fact, then it's presented before legal bodies and they take actual action. So this is the data gathering here going on. This is a very, very large operation. There's also concern that when you look at one of my co-author of mine is Tamil-based, and he did a lot of undercover work. We went to various places in Tamil Nadu where there's a lot of aggressive evangelism going on, with changing the street names, and they are pressuring people to convert, coercion, either through generally financial incentives. Also a lot of hate speech, that your gods are no good, you're going to go to hell. We've taken a lot of leaflets that some of these evangelicals are giving out and had them, I have a whole library of these, translated them into English, scanned them. Some of them are put online, so you can see them. They give a negative, it's not just philosophically, intellectually debate where I disagree with you, that I do also, it's okay. But it's really down and dirty, ground level hatred for our religious icons, whether it is Devi, whether it is Ganesh, and gurus, whether it is Ramakrishna, whether it is Vivekananda. All of them there are so many writings I've shown, you can read all those, where many of our major icons have been deconstructed and disabused in many ways. Abused in many ways. And the family structure, what is wrong with the family structure. So you have to really read the reports in anthropology, the reports in history, the reports in religious studies, human rights, and you will be shocked at the amount of anti-Hindu venom which is being funded, which is being supplied, and then how it is being put to use there. So this is a very big industry.
But have you also investigated into anti-venom about other religions that perhaps is coming out from India?
No,
against Muslims, against Christians?
No, my specialty, you are doing that, a very good job of that already in India. Okay. I am based in the US, so I specialize in doing something nobody else is doing, which is looking at US institutions, US think tanks, US churches, US government, what they are doing. and they are not doing anti-Christian kind of stuff. They are doing anti-Hindu stuff. Now the anti-Buddhist stuff is also started. There is also a fairly large amount after 9/11, a fairly large amount of analysis of Islam and finding out what all is wrong with it. So these are things which are, they may be secular country in the terms of institution of government is separated from the church and so on, but in terms of thinking about these issues, it is considered part of U.S. policy, U.S. think. You go to any degree, any program which is teaching international relations. My daughter is doing advanced degree in international relations. So I know what all they do, what are the topics and all that. One of the topics is religious violence, religious conflict, and then they teach what can the U.S. do in that place. Should we side with this guy against that guy? Can we buy off that guy? Who will favor us? What are the various tribes in that region? So the use of religion as a weapon to understand and study and manipulate and intervene is very much a part of the thought process. We are told that don't talk about these things, ye buri baat hai, ye badtamizi ki baat hai, sharam aani chahiye, sab kuch same hai, like that. But that is just at the pop culture level, okay? But as far as the institutions of power, the institutions where power is vested, they are very deeply involved in these kind of activities.
You know, Mr. Malhotra, it's a fascinating talk. But as I am a student of geopolitics and international relations, you talked about it. Now, what basically is the basic, motive? You said that any foreign donor, when they give it, there are some basic, motives. And one of the motives, as you said, that you have already written a book called, Disintegrated in India or Breaking India, right? Now, geopolitically speaking, have you ever, talked to those very people to find out what actually these Americans gain with the disintegration of India, because I know that in India 1947 when it was divided, it was a geopolitical necessity. There is a very strong theory that it was not divided because of Hindu-Muslim tensions. The Britishers wanted, soon after they leave, they wanted a particular portion of India which will be catering to their geopolitical interest, Indian Ocean, freedom of navigation, what and what not. They are not very sure of an independent India falling in their trap. So they wanted this thing. Now, just let me explain this. Now, as an American policy maker, if I see this particular part of the world, say Israel on the one side and say Japan on the other side, then the entire region is in trouble, not by Islamic not Christian fundamentalists. There I totally agree with John.
I know your question. I've answered it many times.
So let me explain this. As John rightly pointed out, the Christians do not pose any threat because they are too insignificant a number. So basically, if any person, if any groups they really are very keen on a disintegrated India, I'll say some fundamentalist, Islamic fundamentalist or China. My question to you is this: do you think these very organizations which are funding India and creating this sort of tensions, are they funded? They in turn, are they funded by the Islamic sanctums in Saudi Arabia or the Chinese? Because they are the two major countries which want India to be disintegrated.
I understand the question.
I'm sorry. And another question to John.
No. Can I answer the question?
Sir, just 1 minute. John, you said that one should be very much transparent and there should be a very clear definition of national interest. I would like John, please, do you want in this country there should be a very clear and unambiguous definition of secularism? Thank you.
Okay, wait a second. Yeah. Where is India in the geopolitics of America versus Islam versus China? They are the three geopolitical forces. I have given any number of talks, any number of videos. Also in this book, Breaking India, the final chapter is on that. Does it suit their interest? Does it not suit their interest? Does it suit American interest to keep a stable India and use it against China and Islam? Or does it suit America to have a broken India? And similarly for China and similarly for Islam. I've analyzed this. So I've understood this question. I've analyzed the answer it any number of times. In 2005, I gave a 2-night talk on where is India in the American mind, in the eagle's eye. Tonight, Kapila Vatsyan shared it, and this is a video on YouTube. You go to my channel and you can see 2 3-hour videos on this very topic, analyzing from the American point of view. There is the church view. America is not one homogeneous view. Okay, there is the church view, there is the left-wing view, there's many factions comprising America. It's like if somebody living in another country asked, what does India think about, Nigeria or something? The point is that which Indians? Some Indians will think this way, some have a business interest, they will think from a business point of view, some have a different kind of an interest. So Americans are also very polarized. There is corporate interest, there is church interest, there is government interest. These interests also keep fluctuating from time to time. Then there is the Kissinger theory that you keep them sufficiently together but not very strong. You don't let them fall apart, but you don't let them become another China. The Kissinger theory is that you do not want another China where India becomes too strong, and you do not want another Pakistan where it falls apart, because if it becomes another China, you'll have 2 Chinas to worry about. One China is bad enough. Whereas if it falls apart and it becomes like another Pakistan, then you have a bigger problem than with the fragmented. So you neither want a broken India, nor you want a very strong India. You want a mishmash, middle of the road khichdi India that just sort of survives. So there are many American points of view, and I don't have time to give you all of them in the analysis and they're fighting with each other, but you can read this book and you can also watch my videos where I've analyzed this very problem in detail.